Good evening and welcome to Sim Racing Online. You join us here at Imola today for a new series. New sim, new smell. I suppose that's how it goes. Right, I am your host Neil Wood and I'm going to be taking you through round one of what we could maybe refer to as the San Marino Grand Prix. We're going back to 1995 with the car set that we're using today. Locally referred to as the Formula Edge series, but we're using a skin pack which emulates the Formula 1 1995 season. So if you're familiar with that, good on you. I might be throwing some facts your way. Spoiler alert, it is a bit of an old season, so we've got some classic V12s, V8s and V10s, so we're going to be screaming around Italy tonight. And if you see the stats there, all of our cars do have a very similar weight, but the power output is a little bit different. So V8s, V10s and V12s, they will vary a little bit in their fuel consumption. We are doing a 60-minute race today, so there's no mandatory pit stop for our drivers, but be sure to look out to see if anyone's going to be doing anything different today. Wonder if anyone's going to be maybe saving some fuel, trying to get to the end. They do have the option of softs, mediums, and softs, hards, and wets. We don't think anyone's going to be going for the hard tyres. Unfortunately, I won't be able to tell from the comms booth whether anyone will be using different tyres because they didn't change visually back in the 90s. It was a lot harder for viewers to know what was going on. So soft tyres maybe will last a full stint, which is around 40 minutes or so. 140 litres in the tank, but different power delivery for these cars, varying between the V8s, the V10s and the V12s. You'll notice the V10s and the V12s have a higher nose cone, and the V8s will be it'd be V12s with the low nose cone. It'd be the V8s and the V10s that will have the high nose cone. Slight differences in sound as well. So that should be good fun. So I'm all set. I've got my track map up so I can know my way around Imola. We are using the 2005 version. Is it 2005? 1995 to 2000. I forget now. It went until the 2000s. Anyway, 2001 perhaps. So this layout of Imola was used just after the horrendous Grand Prix in 1994. Unfortunately, we lost two drivers, Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger. So there's a little bit of difference. Tamburello, which was one long left-hander, is now replaced by a chicane. There's also changes to do with the Villeneuve chicane, so you slow the cars down, so that now becomes a chicane. And then we are going to head through turns, I believe that's 11, 12 and 13, which is still named Acqua Minerale, but it's a little different. It's a long, ever tightening right-hander into a chicane. So slight differences for our drivers going from the early 90s into the mid-90s, I suppose you would call it. So we do have a set of our drivers just doing practice at the moment. So let's switch over so we can see what's going on. Let's have a quick look at the track map, unfortunately. There we go. So on my track map, apparently there are 22 corners. I don't think the track map shows the 22 corners on there. There's a lot of corners in the chicanes which are classed as more corners than's listed there. But you'll see it's a very varied layout. It's got a good elevation change. And I think it's a Grand Prix it's been around since the 1960s, 70s. They didn't run it a lot in the early days. It was motorcycles and lower power vehicles, but it did run a lot in the 80s and 90s. So that's the information we got. Let's head back to the track so we can see drivers doing a little bit of practice. So, you can see on track at the moment we have about 8 drivers. It is a little bit of a low turnout today. You're expecting a little more. And we are doing a few workarounds today to try and get round some of the broadcasting, I wouldn't say features of Automobilista 2, but it can be a bit of a pain. But at the moment we've got on the track, this is Maddie Shepherd. It does display her username rather than the name of the driver, so I'm going to have to keep on top of that. So she is in the Damon Hill Williams car. You can hear that lovely V10 screaming through. Who else we got? We have Nick Westy. Nick Westy is not far behind. He is running in the Ligier. And I can tell from the helmet it is the Martin Brundle Ligier from 1995. So a fabulous skin pack for this mod, which does come with fictional skins, but someone has been able to make the real thing. They have had to make a few compromises with some of the skins, so you'll find that one of the V12 is a low nose. I don't think any of our drivers have taken that, because we did do car allocation before we started. So the only other V12, apart from the Ferrari in the field, is the Simtech. We don't have anyone registered for what is the Simtech team. Let's switch to one of the V12s, which is Ricciardi, currently in 4th place on a 128.24. So drivers are just got 8 minutes of practice to go. So just going through what is the revised Tamburello chicane, and then down into the Villeneuve chicane, or the Variante Villeneuve, right at the bottom of the hill. So fabulous shot at the bottom of the hill, so we can see the elevation change. So coming up the hill through the Piratella, so don't run too wide, and then we plunge down the hill down into this section. So this is the never-ending right-hand corner as it dips right down and then comes back up. That's Acco Minerali. So that looks like the Minardi of Ben Summers just moving out of the way through the chicane. So that's the Variante outer chicane, and then we come over this crest. We've got to watch for this curb. Don't hit this curb, otherwise it will unset your braking down the hill into the Ravazza, which is 2 left-handers. So don't take too much curb. And in this version of Imola, this is a flat-out right-hander, and you've got to brake really, really hard down into this last chicane, which is the Tosa chicane, and across the line to start a lap. So that's a lap around Imola 1995. Who else have we got on track? We have John van der Geest, another driver that's in a Ligier. So this is going to get very confusing, because I think 2 drivers have taken the same car. So if you see one Ligier, one of them is going to be John van der Geest, and I think the other one's possibly going to be Nick Westy, but we'll have to see. So John van der Geest coming to a stop at the edge of the track. So Phil Brown's another one of our drivers. Currently a little bit off the placement of 133, but entered into the server quite late. So he's running the Rubens Barrichello Jordan. Slightly wide into that chicane. Kicks up a bit of dirt. So we head down to the Villeneuve chicane. So you want to take a little bit of curb on the inside. I found that when I did some of the driving myself, you don't want to unsettle the car too much over the curves. But the elevation change, you've got a couple of blind crests where you just have to trust that you know where the apex is going to be. This is one of them. So you downshift into about 3rd or 2nd gear and try and hug that curb as much as possible. Running wide will be death. You'll meet the barrier in very quick order. So Ben Summers in the Minardi. That's the Luca Badoa Minardi. So you can hear a little bit of a different sounding engine note. So I believe this is possibly the V8 as he comes into the pits. So we'll go back to someone else that's coming on track. So in fact it is Nick Westy that is in a duplicate skin. So we're going to have to possibly get him to change to something else to make my job a little bit easier. Someone didn't read the regs. So Nick Westy coming through the final chicane. So from 1995 onwards, the Formula 1 cars adopted the higher nose of, I believe it was the Benetton that kind of started that trend. It was the funnel airflow around the side pods. A very distinctive look. But the high nose, I don't think lasted too long. They did start some regulations taking it away so that you wouldn't accidentally scoop another car up. I think that was the, or rather is the nose of the car was pretty much at driver eye level. And they thought that might be a safety concern. So Nick Westy currently on a 127.8. Rattling over those curves. When I was trying to do some practice this afternoon, the curbs were pretty scary when you jumped over them. But you need to be quite committed. And runs wide onto the dirt. The dirt is very, very slippy. As soon as you get onto the grass, you've really got to be careful. So through the final chicane, as I said that, runs onto the grass. Dirt on his tyres and he comes to a stop. So Granatovic currently in what I believe might be, I was going to say it might be the V8. Didn't get a chance to actually listen to the engine note. Granatovic coming back to the pits, so he's in the footwork. So that sounds like a V8 to me. Doesn't sound like it's screaming too much. So coming back to the pits. And then we have Clark in the Schumacher Benetton. So this is the car that started it all. The high nose Benetton. So Michael Schumacher in 94 wins the championship, and 1995 would be his second championship year. So coming into the Tamburello chicane, this was a flat out left-hander, but now slowed down into a left chicane. So current provisional practice pace setter is Granatovic with a 127.7, with Nick Westy not far behind with a 127.87, and Shepherd with a 128.1. Now you do wonder whether a lot of the drivers are perhaps trying out their full fuel loads, because it does matter. And I did a little bit of practice again. Drivers do have the opportunity to use soft or hard tyres. I imagine that a lot of people will be on the soft tyre. So that V12 screaming, very distinctive engine note. So when I was doing some practice, there's a little bit of difference with some of the engine modes you can use as well. So, as I said, there might be differing strategies. There isn't a mandatory pit stop. But will there be people that are going to try and lift and coast until the end, and maybe going to try and play the long game? It's a long old race, 60 minutes. And it is a standing start. There are no pace laps or anything, no safety cars. So are we going to have some differing strategies? I suppose it depends what happens at the start of the race. So bumping over the curbs. Got to be committed. As Ricciardi comes over the line to start another lap. So a lot of our drivers in the pits currently tweaking setups, perhaps having a look at their strategy when they're going to pit. So an added advantage for our drivers, if you haven't run or you're not familiar with Automobilista 2, there are no collisions in the pit lane. So even if our drivers come into the pits together, they can actually phase through each other. So there's no possibility of an accidental collision. So we've come to the end of free practice, and we're going to be rolling over to qualifying in short order. So apologies in advance if I accidentally don't grab the mute button. I am suffering with a little bit of a cold and a cough and a dry throat, so hopefully that doesn't cause any problems. Right, back to where we were. So let's go back to our pre-intro so we can see what we're doing. So a reminder, so our driver is going to now complete a qualification session, which is just under 15 minutes. So rules with Sim Racing Online, our drivers do have to go out for an out lap. They have to do their fast lap, and then they have to do their in lap as well. You can't stop out on circuit and then return to the pits. So that is a problem. So no stopping out on the circuit. So drivers are just coming out onto the track. So let's go trackside. Right, so we're currently looking at Granatovic. I believe that's possibly Nick Westy just in front. No, that is Nick Westy just in front in the Ligier. He was able to get out of the pits first. So drivers possibly wanting a little bit of space. They don't really want to be slowed down by the car in front. So Nick Westy will be the first to start a lap. Let's see how he does. So over the final chicane and across the line to start his first lap. So we were aiming for a 1:27 from practice. Let's see if the qualification is going to be any quicker. So no dramas in the first chicane. And up to the Varianta Villeneuve. Up the hill slightly. So you can see the elevation change there. It goes into a little bit of a dip. And you've got carried speed all the way up this hill into what is the Tosa corner. In fact, I think that's Piratella. So we're coming down the hill into Acqua Minerale. It was a brutal chicane in the 1980s and early 90s, but I'm glad it changed. So through the Varianta outer chicane, over this short crest, try not to hit this curb and brake as late as you can down the hill into Ravazza. Running slightly wide on the exit of the first part, but no such worry in the second. So flat out down to the last chicane. It's quite safe through the first curb there. Maybe didn't want to unsettle the car too much. So we're into the 1:27s already. And then straight away, Granatovic takes it by about 2/10, 1:27.51. So who's there next to cross the line? I believe it is our V12 driver. and he goes provisional pole with a 127.4, so it's a great lap time for Ricciardi now that possibly the fuel load is out. They've turned up the engines, so that's good stuff. So shuffles down the order. John van der Geest just got across the line, 130.3, so he's got a little bit of time to find some, maybe a couple of mistakes from van der Geest. So Phil Brown in the Jordan, just coming down to the final chicane. So a little bit of curb and more curb on the right-hander part of the chicane across the line. Phil Brown goes up to fourth, 129.6. So Ben Summers in the Minardi, making his way through the Tosa corner. I think possibly he is just getting out of the way of that driver behind. I think it was Phil Brown that just had a little bit of a excursion. Indeed it was. So this lap is unfortunately going to be aborted. So Clark, what can Clark do? As I've just seen that Shepherd has just popped up to provisional second place with a 127.5. But Ricciardi is putting the gap out. I think that's about 3/4 tenths of a second, 127.18 provisional pole. So what can Clark do for his first lap across the line? That was his out lap. So let's see what Brown can do. I think this is possibly going to be slowing down. Could be coming towards the pits. No, he's going to start another lap, so it's not just one and done for these laps. So across the line, does have a car in front of him. Hopefully that's not going to worry Phil Brown. Does give him someone to chase that. It's Van der Geest just ahead. Does run a bit wide coming out of that chicane. Puff some dust from the car ahead as well. But it does look like John Van der Geest ahead is on a lap, so someone to chase. I always find it a bit easier when you've got the proverbial carrot in front of you. So you've got a car to chase. Makes it easier to set your pace. Well, it is for me anyway. So down the bottom of the hill in Aqua Minerale. Unfortunately we don't have sector times or anything. That is a restriction of using Automobilista 2. And we also will have a little bit of a workaround that we're going to have to do at the start of the race, so bear with me when they set off from the grid. It is going to spawn me on the grid, so I'm going to have to quickly get out of the cockpit and make sure that I get back to the monitor screen. Not well suited for broadcasting, so Phil Brown comes into the pits. So everyone has set a lap time. So Ricciardi currently on the pole in that fabulous Ferrari V12. Shepherd in second with a 127.5. Granatovic in third. Not far behind, only 1/100th of a second. That puts him on the second row, 127.51. I think Westy in fourth with a 127.7. So up the top of the hill in the Piratella, I like that word for some reason, through Aqua Minerale. So on the third row of the grid is Mick Clark, 128.8. Finally put his lap time on the board. Phil Brown is currently in the pits. He's going out again for another run though. So Phil Brown just coming out the pits in the Jordan. 129.6. So a little bit of time to find. We did see him going a little bit wide on some of these corners, kicking up some of the dust. And he did have a car to chase, which was John Van der Geest, and he's actually put a quicker lap time in than John Van der Geest. So John Van der Geest and Ben Summers, the only drivers in the 130s at the moment, so 130.3, and I think that John Van der Geest is possibly running the game in VR, as we see the other Ligier coming into the pits of Nick Westy just in front of us, and that is Ben Summers just going out of shot in the Minardi. So across the line, 130.1 for Van der Geest still. So we check out what Shepherd, very distinctive Williams colours with the Damon Hill helmet. We are expecting a couple more drivers. Did see on the list that we do have a full complement of Williams drivers, and actually a full complement of Benetton drivers as well, but we are missing them today. So Granatovic just starting another lap in his footwork. That definitely does sound like a V8. Still a high nose cone. So fabulous camera shot showing you the layout of this circuit. So all the way up the hill comes towards the Piratella corner, which is one of the faster. Head over this crest and then you dip down. It must feel like a roller coaster in real life. So this corner, which is Acca Minerali, was a very tight chicane, really high curbs back in the previous layout of this this course, and I did wonder whether it was possibly taking a little bit too much curb over that chicane. So try to carry as much speed as possible towards the latter half of this lap, but unfortunately it's going to be to one side. So Phil Brown, who was on a fast lap, unfortunately that put him off, and off he went. There is about just under 4 minutes to go, so he can actually get back to the pits. It does take a little while to get out of the gravel, so I'm sure Phil Brown will be feeling a little bit aggrieved that when he was on a fast lap he met a slower car coming out of that chicane, but no problems at all. So he's doing best to get out of the gravel and get back to the pits. Hopefully that car's not overheating. There he goes. He's probably going to come into the pits after this. Didn't look like he clonked the wall too hard, so and we see another driver in the gravel. Nick Westy coming to grief out the Tamburello chicane. So 3 minutes to go. Ricciardi still on a provisional pole. He's the first driver into the 126s, so 126.96. So Ricciardi has found something on lower fuel. And still not far away, in about 0.3 of a second. Granatovic still on the front row of the grid. And it is quite a short run down into turn 1. Slight bit of opposite lock coming out of the last corner. So no improvement on that lap, but not far off. He did a 127.0, so very consistent. So whereabouts is Shepherd? Shepherd just coming out of the Marianta outer chicane and down the hill towards the Ravazza. So last lap time of 127.7, so still trying to push on. He's got at least about 0.3 to find to get onto the front row of the grid. So she's possibly going to get to the line for one more lap as the clock winds down. She will get across the line for another lap. So last lap time 128.2, so a slight mistake on that lap. So just behind is Nick Westy, just coming into the Villeneuve chicane. No, the Tabarello chicane, rather. Stamping a bit too hard on the loud pedal, so that will ruin his last effort. That will be the last ditch effort. You can see the big black lines left from Nick Westy there, as John Van der Geest just coming through the shop. 129.6, so he's improved his lap time, but not his position. He's not far away from 6th place. So Phil Brown on a 129.60, John Van der Geest on a 129.67, so doesn't have much time to find to be able to just jump up one place. So just coming up to the Varianta outer chicane. That's a very straight line. Hopefully he doesn't get track limits for that. There are only 3 cars left on the circuit. Skip to Maddie Shepherd. This is her last effort. Can she get on the front row of the grid? I don't believe she can. That was a 128.0, so not quite. John Van der Geest, I think, is the next to cross the line. Currently in 7th place. Can he improve? He stays in 7th place. And I believe Ben Summers is the last to cross the line, so a bit of lap time to find for Ben Summers. And he spins across the line. And I think Nick Westy is in the pit, so that is our order. Doing some practice starts at the end of the pit lane. That's not quite how we do a practice start, but hopefully it doesn't go like that in the real thing. So I was just capturing the qualifying order, so I've got a reference for where everyone starts. That's lovely. Okay, so let's go back to our pre-intro. So waiting for the host. Let's remind ourselves of the rules. So I've got to be on my toes here because I've got to actually get to the grid to make sure that I am there. Right, okay. So 60 minutes of racing for our drivers. It is Ricciardi that did get pole, with the only driver in the 126s. Granatovic in 2nd, Shepherd in 3rd, Westy 4th, Clark in 5th, Brown 6th, Geest in 7th, and Summers in 8th. So no mandatory pit stops for our drivers. We'll have to see whether what's going to happen. Who's going to get off the line first? So everyone is readying up in preparation. We've got about a minute to go until we go off the line. So I believe Ricciardi is one of our newcomers to Sim Racing Online, so welcome Ricciardi. According to his flag, he is one of our Swiss drivers. So we're nearly ready. Everyone is hopefully readying up. We're just waiting for the last few. Possibly loading their race setups. You don't want to go out on your qualifying setup. But 60 minutes of racing. We should be pitting around the 40-minute mark or so, but there might be varying strategies. There might be a few people that just pit at half distance. We'll have to see. Alright, just one more left, and then we will be racing. Right, we're waiting for the green flag, and then I can get off the grid. Indeed we do. Right, so Ricciardi, there we go. So Granatovic gets into the lead. Off the start, Ricciardi is in second with Shepherd not far behind. There was a spinner, there was a Benetton I saw spinning into the gravel. Currently 8th place of Ben Summers has come to grief on the grid. I'm not seeing Ben Summers actually moving, but we'll concentrate on the front runs. So the top 3 are away, so that spinner possibly split the next group of drivers. So Granatovic, Ricciardi, and then Shepherd. So let's look at the back of this group here. So this is Shepherd. It's got a nice full view of challengers ahead. But now dropped 1 second off the bat, but Ricciardi is really challenging in this first lap. Maybe he fancies the chance of getting that first position back. As Granatovic runs wide, and Ricciardi says thank you very much. So that was a bit easier than he probably thought. So Ricciardi regains his first place. I think Ben Summers pulled to the side there. I think possibly that might be a technical problem. So we did see a Benetton going off. This was probably Mike Clark. And I think I did see a spinner of Nick Westy, who has dropped down to 5th now, just behind Mick Clark in the Ligier. So if we go on board, this is what Nick Westy can see. So that Benetton just ahead of him. So come up to Piratella. Actually, Phil Brown just behind in the Jordan. It's got a little bit of catching up to do. You can see that he possibly can only just see his competitors ahead going into the chicane. And John van der Geest unfortunately in 7th, bringing up the rear at the moment, so jumping over the curbs. But as we head to the lead again, looks like Ricciardi is now stamping his authority on this race now that he's got past Granatovic, making that costly mistake on lap 1. But the battle is on for 2nd and 3rd. So I'm not sure if we've actually got a rear view. We've got a front view here, so it's a good sense of speed going through this first chicane. Hold on to your hats coming up to the Varianta Villeneuve chicane. You can hear that V10 screaming just behind. Looks like Shepherd possibly made a mistake in that first section of the lap, so she's dropped back about 2 seconds. So current race pace is around 128s, 129s. Mick Clark is the first to go to the pits. He's missing a rear wing, so came to grief somewhere around the circuit. We are on 50% damage. So possibly Mick Clark getting collected by Nick Westy perhaps, because Nick Westy has dropped down. Missing a rear wing is always slightly suspicious. It's either he spun into the barrier or he's been rear-ended. So Mick Clark rather. I'm getting mixed up with Brown and Clark. Brown currently now up to 4th place. But the top 3 pulling away from the rest of the field. Gap of about 2.4 seconds. So best lap time of 128.75 on Ricciardi. One of the only V12s in the field. He's actually about to come up to lap what I believe is going to be John van der Geest just ahead. But it's a long old race, 60 minutes of racing for these guys. So John van der Geest is heading to the left-hand side and letting the leaders through. No, in fact, that is I think that's Ben Summers that's got going again. So the technical problem that he did have has now been resolved and he's got going. It's always good to keep going, because we do have points for... it's 10 points for win, 6 points for second, 4 points for third, and then 3, 2, 1. So it's the classic scoring for Formula 1. So one person is... It seems a bit cruel, doesn't it? One person is going to miss out on scoring today. So if you're going to do 60 minutes of racing and you may actually not score a thing. But, so heading down to the Acqua Minerale. Here we go. John Van der Geest dips down into that chicane. I'm glad they changed that chicane, because it wasn't the greatest of layouts when they had the slower chicane with the higher curbs. But this racetrack has changed in layout quite significantly over the last number of years. And the website that I normally use is racingcircuits.info. It has great information about the circuits and the layouts they used. So as I said, we are using the 1995 to the 2006 version. But before that, they used the version, it was 1985 up to 1994, which was faster in places and slower in others, but vicious curbs, absolutely vicious. So just 5 laps gone. Lead of 5 seconds. So Ricciardi wants to build that lead. Perhaps that's going to play into what he does with his strategy. Unfortunately, we can't see fuel load, so we don't know whether these drivers have fueled up and are going to go as far as possible. So bouncing over the curbs. Good sense of speed. So this would have been a flat out left-hander. He's now a third gear. Left, right, left chicane. Trying to carry as much speed as you can through that last part of the chicane. So I'm seeing our drivers already spreading out. I'm seeing 4th place, Phil Brown. Is that Phil Brown? Is he missing a rear wing there? I think we're seeing the sky there. I'm not sure why. Maybe that was a little bit of lag. And I think Phil Brown has unfortunately disconnected, so that might be our first... I was going to say first mishap. So that's unfortunate for Phil Brown, because he was running in 4th place. So that puts John Van der Geest... See, the two Ligiers are running together, so John Van der Geest and Nick Westy not far behind. So everyone currently is going to score points, which is always good. So we do have a 6-race season for this series. The so-named Formula Edge series. That's just what they named it in Automobilista 2. So we do have a 6-race series every 2 weeks. So our next round will be heading to Barcelona, but it will be doing the 1991 version of Barcelona. And then we head to Silverstone, which is the 1991 version. Very classic version of Silverstone. I like the 90s version of Silverstone. Then round 4 will be Spa-Francorchamps, which is the 2005 layout. And then we head to the long, long straights of Hockenheim in Germany for the 2001 layout of that circuit. So it was the last time they used the long straights of Hockenheim, I believe. And then we head to the streets of Adelaide in Australia for the 1988 layout of that street circuit. So that's going to be a big challenge for our drivers to keep it off the walls for the entire 60 minutes. So I am looking forward to that. So the gap has come out to 5.6 seconds to Granasovic. So perhaps a couple of drivers playing the long game. Turn the engine down and see how far you can get. But as I say, I'm wondering what's going to happen with pit strategy, but I'm not expecting anyone to be coming in before Not expecting anyone to come in before half distance. It does look like we've lost one more driver as well, so Mick Clark has decided to call it a day, which is a bit of a shame. So I don't know if Mick Clark had any particular technical problem. But it's always good to stick around so that oh, our first pit stop. This is very I didn't actually expect anyone to be coming in this early, so is this a problem? Or is this Shepherd going aggressive? Possibly going for a two-stopper. So we know that from practice runs, a pit stop is about 7 or so seconds, so that seemed about that kind of time. So that could have been topping off with fuel and a tyre change. And Shepherd comes out of the pits into traffic, so I think that is Nick Westy just ahead of her. So that isn't ideal, so fresher tyres. So that wasn't ideal to come out into traffic. So I wonder whether anyone else spotted that Shepherd was going to be held up. So last lap time for Westy, 1:30.3. Shepherd could get down to the 1:29.7 range. So this might be ruining Shepherd's strategy. But maybe this is a two-stopper. So pitting on lap 9. About 13 minutes into this race. I wonder if that's planned. Perhaps it was. So this is for position. So Nick Westy just ahead of us in the Ligier. So coming up to the final chicane, this is where we need to get a good exit out of this final chicane, and possibly this is the best place that Shepherd will want to pass, and makes it easy on Shepherd because Nick Westy gets, it was either off the curb or he just got on the loud pedal too quickly. So that's given Shepherd a little bit of a break, and now she can push on and build that gap. So the Minardi of Ben Summers just ahead, currently in 6th place. So Ben Summers always very aware of the cars around him. He pulls to the left hand side, lets the lapping cars through. So the lead gap is now up to 7 seconds. Ricciardi leads, Granatovic in 2nd, Shepherd in 3rd. So here's your leader, the screaming V12 of the Ferrari, heading up to the Villeneuve chicane. What I did notice in my practice laps, you can actually flat spot your tyres quite dramatically. I did that quite a lot. Letting off the brake and letting the tyres roll rather than locking up. They do leave a big scorched patch on the tyre. So first place now, a gap of 8 seconds. So looking at last lap times, so very similar. So Ricciardi put in a 1:29.2 that last time around. Granatovic 1:29.6. So he's gaining like through about 4/10 every lap. And then we have Shepherd now 44 seconds behind. But remember, Shepherd has made a pit stop. So perhaps an aggressive two-stop strategy, or perhaps accidentally having the qualifying fuel. Do not know. We can't see these things. So now that Shepherd is through, She is now pulled away from Westy in the Ligier. So down to the Ravazza corners, the left-handers. There's a little bit of runoff at the edge of that circuit. It does look like it's AstroTurf, so it's not got a lot of grip. And then we have the second Ligier of John van der Geest bumping over those curbs. And Ben Summers, who I think is possibly a lap down, 2 laps down after looked like he had a technical problem on the grid. So it must have been a mistake from Granasovic in second. The gap is now up to 11 seconds unseen. The last lap time of 1:32.4, so we missed a perhaps going off. I wonder if any of our drivers have decided to go for a long strategy of fuel saving and maybe sticking on the hard tyres. I did speak to John van der Geest before today's race, and he was talking about the soft tyres can make it to the end of 60 minutes. We do have quite an elevated track temperature. 41 degrees is quite warm. Air temperature 30 degrees Celsius. So it is quite warm out there. Light cloud, 3 kph of wind. I don't think that's going to affect our drivers. We're not expecting any wet weather. I don't think our admins want to complicate matters by making a wet weather race. That would really put the spanner in the works, as they say. So Ricciardi in the screaming V12 comes down to the Aquaman Rally again. Could maybe call this a helicopter shot, perhaps. So, the Imola circuit, currently FIA Grade 1. It actually opened in 1953. 25th of April 1953, so 73 years ago. It didn't open to Formula 1, but it currently runs the WEC series, so the World Endurance Championship, for the 6 hours of Imola. The ELMS also runs here for the 4 hours of Imola, and also the Lamborghini Super Trofeo. And what I can see on my list, the GT World Challenge is set to come to Imola. It missed out a number of years. It was last time it was here was 2022, but it's coming back in 2027. As I say, this was a Formula 1 Grand Prix for a number of years. The Italian Grand Prix from 1969 missed out a few years because it was swapping around with other circuits. Came back in 1972, missed 73, then it was 74 and 75. Missed 76, so you can see there's a gap there for an Italian Grand Prix. 1977, missed out 78, came back in 79, and then a huge gap between 79 and 88. But formerly did hold the Grand Prix of Italy for motorcycle racing as well, World Superbikes, along with touring cars. So it's had lots and lots of varied numbers of varied things, varied cars, varied motorbikes coming around the circuit. But I hope it does come back to Formula 1. I think there's been talk that it might actually come back to Formula 1. The last time they did run Formula 1 around here was 2025. So it is perfectly possible. So Imola in the Emilia-Romagna. I think that's the town or the city. It's just outside in Italy. Now officially the circuit is 19 turns in the modern layout. It hasn't changed an awful lot from how this circuit is. Got maybe a couple of tweaks, but not an awful lot. So the 1995 to 2006 version, which we are using today, is 4.9 kilometers, or 4.95 kilometers, and 3.08 miles. That record by Michael Schumacher in the Ferrari 2024, 120.4. So I think we're lagging a little bit behind the lap record. But say 22 turns on this circuit. So our drivers are going to be worn out, I would think. And if you're in the UK at the moment, it's a little bit sweaty. So our drivers possibly have to... they're possibly sim racing in front of a fan. I know I would be. So, 38 minutes to go. 6 drivers left on the circuit. So everyone is going to score points today. You just have to keep going. So I don't think there is a particular distance that drivers have to get to. It is just... if you're classified, you could retire now and still collect some points. But we've got 6 rounds of this championship to go. It's always difficult with the Formula 1 scoring, because if you drop down early, it can be quite difficult to catch up. So 10 points for first and 6 points for second. So there's a bit of a bonus for finishing in first. So our leader is already going to have a 4-point lead on second place. So there are no bonus points for pole position or fastest lap. As Ricciardi is looking like he's got this race under control. 12.6 seconds is now the gap. So Ricciardi is not actually a newcomer to Sim Racing Online. What you'll notice from Sim Racing Online is if you go to simracingonline.co.uk, you can see all the stats of the drivers that run. He last raced with us in February 2022. So it's been a while since he's raced with us, so welcome back to Ricciardi. And he did take a championship, which was the GT1 series in December 2018. Three wins set, 8 second places and 7 thirds. Granasevic heading down to the Ravazza corner, not running too wide. So a reminder, there is no mandatory pit stop in this race. The only driver to pit is our third place driver of Maddie Shepherd. Whether that was scheduled, I will find out about from these drivers. I do little, say, interviews, like informal interviews. I do ask them questions about what happened in the race, because you never fully know whether the drivers have a problem. So I possibly want to know what happened at the start between the one of the Bensons. I believe that was Mick Clark. And we had the technical problem for Ben Summers that didn't get off the line. He pulled to one side, so possibly had technical problems, or perhaps at the worst possible moment someone rang his phone. It does happen. Real life gets in the way. So John Van der Geest, after a little bit of a shaky start, is now up to 5th place, but due to retirements of Phil Brown, which looked like a disconnection, because I did see the car just disappeared. So Phil Brown is unfortunately one of our retirees, and Mick Clark 6th and 5th respectively. So the closest battle on track is between Nick Westy and Shepherd, but if we go to the cockpit of Nick Westy's car, I would have to squint to actually see where Shepherd's car is in front. She's about a corner ahead. So Nick Westy is still pushing. His best lap time is a 1:29.8. But he's currently struggling to get into that range. He's in the 1:30s at the moment. So is it time for a pit stop? Have people been taking too much out of these tyres at the start of this race? Perhaps. As the car ahead of Shepherd puts in a 1:29.2. So she is pulling away from the driver we're looking at of Nick Westy. So 1995, Michael Schumacher's second championship year with Benetton. He won the 1994 season. He was able to take the championship with not too much of trouble from Damon Hill. And then he moved to Ferrari, what would become this car for 1996. So the V12 of the Ferrari, and I believe this footwork is shown as a V8 here. It's not necessarily a V8 in the real Grand Prix. So looking up some stats here. Wikipedia is so useful for this stuff. So the footwork Hart. So it ran on a Hart 830 3-litre V8, so it is quite similar. It's got quite distinctive sound. And then you've got the V10 Renault engine, so the Renault RS7. They're all 3-litre engines in 1995. I believe that the Ligier is modelled after a V10 in this game, but looking down my list, it is the Mugen Honda V10. So driven by Guri Suzuki, Martin Brundle and Olivier Panis. This is Martin Brundle's liveried helmet. And then we have the Minardi, and looks like that was Granatovic just going through. So the Minardi, I believe that is the Luca Badoa helmet, that is. So this is definitely a V8 Ford Cosworth engine. Driven by Pierluigi Martini, Pedro Lamy and Luca Badoa. So I forgot to mention the Ferrari, back in those days, was running a V12, looking down my list. We do have a few people signed up for some different liveried cars, so we're apparently going to have some McLarens. Looking down my list, who else have we got? Yeah, we're missing a McLaren of Tony Tauviti today. Hopefully we'll see him back for the next few rounds. And then we've got Gilles da Silva that will be popping into the Sauber. So the Red Bull Sauber back then. No one decided to take the Pacific, the Simtek or the Tyrrell. Or the 40 Ford. Now if you're familiar with the 90s season or the 95 season, the 40 Ford was the bright yellow shod car. You could definitely see it. And you could also see that it was the 40 because it was normally lapped by about 4 laps. So our next pit is Granatovic coming in exactly at half distance. So not staying in the pits for very long. It's very hard to tell if they took tyres or not. That was just probably under 6 seconds, 7 seconds. So possibly fuel and tyres. So the early pit stop of Shepherd was able to get out in front of Granatovic. Now, I was looking at lap times of Granatovic. Similar pace to Shepherd, but Shepherd has been pushing on in lap time. But if she changed tyres at that very early stage, that means she's got to pull out a little bit of a gap in order to stay ahead. Another driver that's just come into the pits is Nick Westy. So Nick Westy now pits from what I think was 4th place and has come out just behind his teammate, which is John van der Geest. Leader coming into the pits from 1st place, and he's possibly going to leave in 1st place. I'm looking at the lap time, so a very quick stop. I'm looking at the map. The 2nd and 3rd place are still down at the Ravazza chicane, and they won't be up to the main straight. So pits from the lead and stays in the lead. That is the lap car Ben Summers just behind. So I think the only car that's not coming to the pits is possibly John van der Geest, unless I missed him. So the only driver that was possibly doing something a little bit different is Shepherd. I wonder if Shepherd actually came in to get some fresh boots and fresh air. She did come out behind Nick Westy that held her up for a couple of laps, and I kind of thought that was all over. So perhaps a few mistakes from Granatovic has meant that Shepherd has now gone back into 2nd place. So Ricciardi, 22 laps. We're past half distance. Popping over the chicane. Got 12 seconds over the 2nd place car. You can see the footwork of Granatovic just behind. So you see 2 different methods coming through that Varianta out of the chicane. One driver taking the first curb quite heavily, and the other driver taking the 2nd curb quite heavily. 2 different methods and possibly coming out of the same result. Coming down to the end of the lap. So Granatovic not far behind, within about a second or so. 0.8 of a second. So Nick Westy in 4th place, with the Ligier of John van der Geest not far behind. So I don't know if we'll be able to see Nick Westy from the cockpit. You can see Nick Westy there, just coming down to the Ravazza. So there was a lot of turning lock from, I don't know if that's just a visual thing, or whether that's the visual, or that's the actual steering lock that John van der Geest is using, because it looked quite severe. So possibly suffering from a little bit of mid-race understeer. And we were talking before the race about possible strategies, saying that you can make these soft tyres last. There's probably a big performance difference in soft and hard tyres, so trying to get these soft tyres to the end. But a stint of fuel, 140 litres that you can put in these cars, won't get you to the end of the race. So now I can see just behind, possibly Shepherd has made a little bit of a mistake, which has meant that Granatovic is right under her rear wing. Now looking at fastest lap times, Shepherd is able to do a 129.2 at the quickest. Granatovic has only been able to do a 129.6, so she can pull out a little bit of a gap if she needs to, but now Granatovic does have the advantage of slipstream. But it just depends where you can use it. So this straight, not as long as it used to be, broken up by 2 chicanes as we come up to what is the Tosa hairpin, I suppose. A slight right-hand curve coming up to the Piratella, so over the top of this crest. Don't take too much curb on the inside because it pushes you wide down the hill towards the Acqua Minerale. Miss the curb on the inside there. Hug the curb on the second part of it. You don't want to take too much curb on the outside of it because you will lift your left side tyres off the ground. Then taking a lot of curb through the very outer chicane. Seems like he's gaining in this part of the track. Oh, slight, it looked like Shepherd hit the curb and got slightly out of shape under braking. So coming down to the last part of the lap is I thought Granatovic was possibly going to fake a look to the inside there. So longest straight of the lap. Shepherd does fake to the inside there to cover off. So flat out coming up this section here. Granatovic goes to the outside, but then ends up on the inside to this curve. So what has Shepherd got in response? So the V10 of this Williams Renault coming up the hill. So with the boot is on the other foot, as they say. So what can Shepherd do? So taking a lot of curb on the entry to Acqua Minerale and up the hill towards the chicane. So how much curve do we take at this chicane? Not an awful lot. We have seen people pretty much straight lining that chicane. I don't know how much is allowed for track limits, but so Granatovic, after that early pit stop by Shepherd, is now back past. So big long stint, perhaps an early pit stop, and now suffering a little bit at the latter half of this race. She's coming into the pits, so possibly an aggressive 2-stop strategy, because I can see that it's now 20 minutes to go, and she did pit after about 15 to 20 minutes, so going really aggressive, but she's got a lot of time to catch up. She's not really in any worry of losing 4th place because Nick Westy is just coming through the Ravazza corner and Shepherd is already onto the main straight and away, so didn't lose an awful lot. But a 2-stop strategy for Shepherd. Everyone else is deciding to do a 1-stop. So I wonder when it was a good strategy. Maybe she was locked in to doing a 2-stopper. Maybe he only had the fuel. And we see that Van der Geest is indeed coming into the pits. So this is a big long stint at the start of the race for John Van der Geest. I don't think he's going to be losing any places because unfortunately Ben Summers is a few laps down, but still in 6th place. So a big long stint at the start of the race and a shorter stint at the end for John Van der Geest. But he is going to drop a number of seconds behind Nick Westy. So unless Nick Westy has a problem. So varying number of strategies. Some people pitting at half distance, some people pitting quite early, and then John Van der Geest is the opposite and pitting very late for his first stop. But with 20 minutes to go, Ricciardi, after losing the lead early on, he managed to gain it back by I guess pushing Granatovic into a little bit of mistake on lap 1. He was able to get back through. He did get pole. We unfortunately did miss the first part of people getting off the line, but that's just the disadvantage of having to use Automobilista 2, which has the disadvantage of, to actually broadcast this race, I had to actually get to the grid and then get out of the car. It's not ideal. We may try a different method next time so that we don't miss the start. 'Cause we did miss a couple of accidents going into one of the first chicanes. So not ideal for broadcasting, but we're trying out some new things. We wanted to try whether this was suitable, and hopefully you're being entertained by the show these drivers are putting on. Hopefully we have a few more drivers for next time, and hopefully if you want to join us, head to simracingonline.co.uk and sign up with us. The more drivers, the better. We do race Automobilista 2. We are currently running a World Series in the Mon Ultimate, the GT3 series, and we also run a little bit of Assetto Corsa and our Factor 2, so a varied number of sims, depends what you want to do. And we are going to be branching out a little into some race room experience, so we're just trying out a few things for race room experience. Whether or not we can broadcast those races or not, we'll see. So with 18 minutes to go, Ricciardi 28 laps, Granatovic in second. I believe he has a lap car of John Vandergeest just ahead that's just pitted. So after the pit stops, I'm looking at lap times. Granatovic is now down to 1:29.2, so he's found a bit of lap time. So maybe the battling with Shepherd has given him the little bit of a hurry up he needed. He's been able to push on. But the two-stop strategy from Shepherd has not really worked out. He did gain her some positions at the start. I thought the undercut was going to work, but it's ended out that she's just ended up back to where she started, really. Possibly tried to get out of the traffic at the start, and then ended up lapping on her own for a little bit. Did get stuck behind fourth place driver of Nick Westy for a little while, and then managed to get some free air. But since then, a little bit different. So wondering when our remaining rounds that we've got in this championship, there are varied numbers of circuits, different layouts of circuits, all around the same kind of era. We try to match up the cars with the eras of circuits that we're using, and I don't believe any of them are DLC, so you don't need any extra content if you want to join us. So we'll be heading to the big long straights of Spain in Catalonia on 22nd of August. So the 1991 layout of that, I remember the what's it called, the Lacaxa Bridge. I was just taking some photos for the stream yesterday, and very. I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, you'll know the bridge I'm talking about, or it's over the main straight. I think it's blue, red, and yellow. I think. Can't remember the latter half of the circuit in 1991. I remember it has lots of chicanes in it. But then we're heading to Silverstone 1991, which I believe still has the start straight in the original location, and Bridge Corner, which will be awesome in these cars. So if you don't know Silverstone, there's a part of the circuit where you drop down under the bridge, absolutely flat out in those days. And then on 19th of September, we'll be heading to Spa-Francorchamps in 2005. Now, I'm unfamiliar with Spa-Francorchamps in 2005. I can't remember. I think the bus stop is a little bit different. And it might be a little bit different from today's layout. But apart from that, it should be very familiar to everybody. And then on the 3rd of October, we will be going to the long straights of Hockenheim. 2001. It's the last time that they used the long straight layout, because they pretty much cut out the forest section. And I understand why. It's because once the cars headed off into the forest section, there was no grandstands to see the cars, so it wasn't a very good viewing experience. So once we've done the long straights of Hockenheim in Germany, we'll be heading for the last round on the 17th of October for the streets of Adelaide in Australia. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that one. So hopefully we can keep the numbers up to all the way to the end of the season. So other things that we've got going on at Sim Racing Online, as I said, we do multiple sims here. We've got a number of series. As Granatovic, I think, is just coming up to lap one of the Ligiers. Not sure which one that is. It's either Westy or John van der Geest. It must be John van der Geest, because I can see Nick Westy is at the other part of the circuit. So along with this series, we've actually got another series running tomorrow. So August the 9th, we're running the World Series Formula V8 3.5 Championship. So a very quick car in R Factor 2. And then on Tuesdays, we'll be running a Mini Cooper Championship in Automobilist 2. So if you're familiar with the support races for BTCC, the Mini Cooper Challenge or the Mini Cooper Cup, it should be good fun to watch and good fun to actually be in as well. I'm not a fan of front wheel drive myself, but that should be fun. So that's August the 11th. And then Saturday, so alternate Saturdays. It's the season, I believe, is nearly over in Assetto Corsa. So 15th of August, the Evo Triangle. I have been looking at some of these events. It's actually a one race event in Assetto Corsa, which will be in the Ford GT1. So we've got a few sign-ups for that so far, so that should be very interesting as a special event. And then we have, for alternate Sundays, as I say, we've got the World Series in the Mon Ultimate, which is just a basic GT3 championships, which goes towards the aggregate points in the World Series. We've already had round 1 of the World Series. This will be round 2, and then we add up all the aggregate points, and we crown a World Series championship at the end of the season. I believe it's going to be four series in the end, and it's up to the drivers what sim they want to do, or in fact what cars they want to do next. So it might not even be in the Mon Ultimate next time, so we'll have to see. So we do a live broadcast with that as well, so that's 16th of August for the next round. And then the last thing we got on the list is the 18th of August, which is the GTPC C2 and GT Revival multi-class series, which I believe is heading to some of the final rounds. It's on the 5th round of 6. So it's so 60 sports cars around 60s tracks. That's in R Factor 2, so that's got a lot of I've seen a lot of people liking that championship, and particularly because it's multi-class as well. We've got six cars in the upper class and 9 cars in the lower class, I think that's right. But a very competitive championship, it looks like. But head to Sim Racing Online and sign up. The website holds all the stats for all the drivers. It'll be good to have you. Now, normally I would be driving some of the championships, but I've unfortunately been a bit under the weather for the past few weeks. In fact, the last week or so. And I have been, I would say, injured for a number of months. I've had problems with my shoulder, and driving for long periods is not something I really should be doing. But I'll find out more from the doctors a bit later on. And it's just too damn hot in the UK at the moment, so every time you put on the headset and you want to do some driving, I mean, I did a few laps around here and testing out all of the versions of the cars we have. I particularly like the V10. I'm not really a modern Formula kind of driver. I'm a bit slower than some of these drivers on circuit at the moment, so I wouldn't really be that competitive. But you break a sweat very, 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 very easily. So John Van der Gies is probably breaking a sweat in that headset that he's in at the moment, I would imagine. So Ben Summers currently 4 laps down due to that technical problem at the start. We'll try and find out what happened to Ben Summers at the start. He did pull off to one side on the grid, so it may have been technical problems or real life possibly getting in the way of driving, because we know that sometimes does happen, real life calls. Looks like that is Shepherd just coming to put another lap on Ben Summers. But Ricciardi out front by 11.2 seconds. He's lapping in the 130s, so he's backed off the pace. I think a lot of our drivers have just decided that they just want to finish, because they're all in the 130s. They're all spaced out by about 10 to 20 seconds. So possibly this 60-minute race maybe suffering a little bit with just getting a bit too hot. I love this camera. It does give a great sensation of speed coming down the hill. And when I tried these cars myself, as I said, the V10 seemed to be the one that I would go for. I don't know, maybe it was the sound. It just seems to be the way it drove. They do have different handling characteristics, so not only do they have different power outputs. The V12 is the most powerful of the lot, but they have different handling characteristics of I suppose they are the same wheelbases and everything. They are bopped, if you can call it that. Just looking at my info here. So they're all the same weight. They're all 595 kilograms. I'm sorry I don't know that in imperial, because I am a metric person. But all 3 litres, V8, V10s and V12. So the power output of a V8, which I believe, I don't know if that's a V8 or a V10 now. I'm second guessing myself. That footwork does maybe sound like a bit more like a V10, but a V8, 645 horsepower. But we definitely know that this is the Renault V10. The Renault V10 is 670 horsepower. It's the only car in the field that's got a 7-speed gearbox. The rest of the cars have a 6-speed gearbox. And then we obviously have the only Ferrari in the field, which is the V12, which is Ricciardi, 695 horsepower. So it's the most powerful. So perhaps this car will be an absolute monster at Hockenheim with those big long straights. But what I did find from these cars is they do set the aerodynamic package depending on what circuit you go to. So it's possibly going to be on the low downforce configuration for places like Hockenheim. So we might see a little bit of difference with the amount of downforce these cars have. So they might change their look a little. So those rear wings might be a little thinner. We should get some good drafting battles down the straights of Hockenheim. So, not tempting fate, it looks like, with just under 4.5 minutes to go. Ricciardi, 9.9 seconds. Now, it does look like Granatovic is pushing on. That gap is coming down by about a second a lap. But this final push at the end of the race, he's got 9.5 seconds to find, but only 4 minutes to find it. So I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that possibly Ricciardi is just pacing himself to the end. Possibly has some pace in hand. And then we have Shepherd, who tried a two-stopper. I think the two-stopper was probably the wrong way to go for this particular race. So we may see that strategies converging, so we see people trying a few different things, but maybe finding things that do and don't work in the first couple of rounds, and then strategies tend to kind of converge a little. So we had Shepherd was the only driver that pitted early on in the race after about 15 to 20 minutes. So a very early stop, and has done a very long last part of this race. The rest of the drivers, apart from John van der Geest, did a half-distance strategy. And then we had John van der Geest that did a big first stint, and then pitted about 40 to 45 minutes. So, short last stint for John van der Geest. So Shepherd is pushing on near the end of this race, 129.1. She's done her fastest lap of the race, in fact, that last lap around. So she still has some tyre life. So those soft tyres have been able to hold on. And I think she's got too much to find to catch Granatovic, because Granatovic is about 20 seconds ahead of her. So I think we had Nick Westy had possibly had a spin at the start of the race. I did see a Ligier go off, but again we've got two Ligiers in the race, so it could have been Nick Westy, or it could have been John van der Geest. So Westy coming up to put a lap on Ben Summers in the Minardi. Ben Summers moves to the left and lets him through. And then we got John van der Geest with that late stop strategy, has dropped him down about a minute behind Westy, so that possibly wasn't the way to go. But he is in the 130s. He's been around about that pace for the entire race, so he's keeping it very stable. But not able to push into the 129s, as we see Ben Summers popping over those curbs. We are on 50% damage, so no suspension failures, hopefully, from people jumping over these curbs. So Ricciardi, now the gap is down to 8.6 seconds. We've got just over a minute to go. So Ricciardi is going to come across the line with about 45 seconds to go. So this will be the final lap. And he does possibly have some pace in hand. So let's go on board for his final lap. Up the main straight, up towards the Variante Tamburello. So a very quick chicane going left. Taking a lot of curb on the first part and the second. Accelerate hard up towards the second chicane of the Variante Villeneuve. So you freewheel it into the first part and try and get these apexes up towards what is the Tosa chicane. Keep it very, very tight, because you've got to launch your car all the way up this hill. A slight bend to the right, up to the Piratella. Very, very quick third gear, perhaps second gear corner, and then you head all the way downhill into the Aqua Minerale. One apex, two apex, and you've got three apex on the outside. Then a short straight upper to the Variante Outer. Take as much curb as you like. A lot of people have been straight lining it, as Ricciardi shows us. Then all the way over this small crest. Don't hit that curve on the inside, otherwise you'll get out of shape. Down to the Ravazza left-handers. So the last time out of the Ravazza, and he's going to come up to the last chicane. It's been a dominant performance by Ricciardi. Welcome back to Sim Racing Online as he crosses the line. That is the race complete. So Ricciardi gets the win. Granatovic is going to cross the line in second, 6.6 seconds behind. So he closed that gap down, but I think Ricciardi still had a little bit of pace in hand. Shepherd is going to come back in third. Good run from Shepherd. A slightly different strategy to everybody else, so a two-stopper. Perhaps we might change that for the next round. Nick Westy still out the top of the Ravazza chicane. Coming down to the final two corners of the lap. So still a fourth place. That's about 3 points for Nick Westy as it comes across the line. John van der Geest has already been lapped, so he's on his slow down lap. And then we have our last finisher, and our last point score will be Ben Summers, who grabs the final point. And there you have it. That is the finish of what is the Italian Grand Prix. Right, so that is done and dusted for this week. So as I said, we've got one more. Our next round is at, if I can look up on my list. Where is my list? It's all on the website for me so I can see it. So I've been punted back to the menu screen. Okay, so we did have a couple of retirements, but unfortunately we did miss, I think Phil Brown possibly got disconnected, and we saw Mick Clark come into the pits with some damage. So possibly either not getting repaired or decided to maybe call it a day. So our next round would be on the 22nd of August, which will be at the Catalunya circuit in Barcelona in Spain. That'll be the 1991 version of the circuit. So as I've been repeating most of the way through this broadcast, if you enjoyed what you've seen, give this stream a like. Helps the algorithm. And it's been very entertaining watching these drivers around this circuit going much faster than I could. I did try driving these cars around this circuit, and I didn't even get to the 130s, so I don't know what I was doing wrong. But so the streets of Barcelona. It's not the streets. So the 1991 version of Catalonia, big, long, straight. So plenty of drafting opportunity, and there's some very high downforce corners. So possibly these cars will be running a high downforce configuration for that race. We'll have to see. But there was a few absentees today. Hopefully they will be back next time out. And hopefully we'll be a bit cooler, because it's blisteringly hot, even though it is 9:30 at night. It still is very, very warm, and I'll be glad to actually switch this machine off and dab my brow. so thank you for joining us at Sim Racing Online. I've been your host, Neil Wood, and join us back here for what will be a broadcast of the Le Mans Ultimate Series on Sunday the 16th of August. I will be in the broadcast booth with Rob Milliken. The next round is possibly we possibly might have Rob Milliken either on the track or in the booth. I don't think he's sure which he wants to do yet. So we'll have to see whether Rob Milliken will be on track or behind the microphone. But as I say, if you want to join us at Sim Racing Online, go to simracingonline.co.uk. We run Automobilista 2, R Factor 2, Assetto Corsa, Le Mans Ultimate. We are going to plan on doing some race room experience and possibly going into other sims like Project Motor Racing might be something. But again, some sims are better suited to broadcasting than others. Unfortunately, Automobilista 2 does have its drawbacks than other sims for broadcasting. But hopefully you have enjoyed the broadcast, and hopefully you can join us for next time. So if you subscribe, we normally do put the live the live broadcast links up in a little bit in advance, so you can see and press the notify button, so you'll be able to see or get notified when it actually goes live. But the VOD is up and as soon as the broadcast ends, so if you didn't manage to catch it, subscribe and you can see the VOD instantly. So I've been your host, Neil Wells, as I said, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.